Hi everyone, I'm Zach Reinhardt, here to review the new BLONDnewHALF album, Clean. BLONDnewHALF is a four-piece punk band that has been around since, I believe, the mid-2000s, and I've honestly had a bit of trouble tracking down much concrete information on them. At least in the short moments before this review I did. They sound like they're a band from the Kansai area based off just how they sound, and they used to be signed on to Gune Cassette, or Gune Cassette, or whatever, which was I believe, Osaka-based label, so maybe they're from Kansai, but I don't really know. But more importantly is they are a kind of blistering, long-standing, energetic punk band. I first heard about BLONDnewHALF several years ago, and I picked up their, I believe, only other full-length album, though I could be wrong on that, Stop Play Punk. This album is noisy, it's fast-paced, and is pretty quintessential Japanese punk, with its somewhat jittery and strange approach to grooves, and high energy. But that was released some amount of years ago now. It's been a few years at least, and I saw that they were dropping a new album here called Clean this year, and I got pretty excited. I was pretty pumped for it, and I was gonna order it online or off Amazon or whatever, but I really couldn't find anybody who was shipping it to America from Japan. So it's been several months of waiting to get this album, but I finally went to Japan and just bought it while I was there. And I have to say, it is better than I expected, and I expected it to be pretty good. The album's first track is a short but intense little number called In Order. It starts with these pounding snare drums and some kind of echoey, shouted vocals that quickly builds into a wall of intense drumming, busy bass, and noisy, distorted guitars, with a lot of energy behind them. The second track, Tulip, is similarly noisy, fast-paced, and intense. And these first two songs, while enjoyable, I did find to be a little bit disappointing just because they're very typical BLONDnewHALF songs. BLONDnewHALF isn't really reinventing the wheel with their sound at all with these first two tracks. But they do just start to steer off into a bit more post-punky territory with the third track, Minimum Revolution. This song features the first real extended look at the strange sonic palette that BLONDnewHALF is employing all over this album. The guitar is distorted, but in this very strange, kind of unsettling way that doesn't really sound like any other guitar that I've ever heard. The shouted vocals are somewhat echoey and somewhat distorted, and the whole song has this lo-fi feel, while the bass and drums do this much slower, plodding groove built upon these kind of pounding toms. This song reminds me a little bit of the band Zutonazo, who are a very good, kind of strange, somewhat atmospheric post-punk group. But then, after a few minutes of getting acclimated to this slower, more deliberate groove, the song suddenly cuts that and picks up the pace like tenfold into a fast, BLONDnewHALF-y punk section that goes till the end of the track. There's what I guess could technically be classified as a guitar solo on here, though it's really more this kind of avant-garde noisescape from the guitar, while the rest of the band just pounds away as aggressively and energetically as they can. And like I said, the guitar tone is very strange. It's brittle and distorted, but it also feels kind of echoey and like it has some like chorus on it, or maybe even ring modulation at times. Some very strange effects, to sum it up. And the kind of strangeness and noisiness starts to amp up into the next tracks, Speed Boy and Sext. Speed Boy is as fast and aggressive as you might expect a song called Speed Boy to be, but it also has this echoey kind of atmospheric guitar tone and very lo-fi, brittle, dense aesthetic. The song transitions seamlessly into Sext, which is where the guitar starts to go even a bit more crazy with this big noisy tone and this tremolo effect on it that goes into another kind of nonsense noisy guitar solo, and all of this building chaos really peaks in the sixth track, Nimule. Nimule is where the kind of sanity of the guitar finally breaks, and we get what is basically completely atonal, free improvisation on top of an aggressive, punky rhythm section with some, of course, typical high-pitched, shouty vocals. And the song is just nonsense. It is just going as fast as it can, as hard as it can, without any real care for what it's doing in the meantime. It eventually builds into this big guitar solo that is this impenetrable, noisy wall of intensity. And it is at this point where I'm starting to feel that this album really is becoming something more than the sum of its parts. While any one of these songs might be just a really solid track on its own, when you put them all together the way this album does, it makes this kind of building, mounting kind of craziness and energy that the album has that really explodes by the end of it. And it makes this album feel just all the more unhinged and crazy, despite the fact that there's actually some pretty smart riffs on here and some fairly technical playing for a punk album. It's not prog rock. And the album doesn't stop building intensity there. The next song, Breed, is one of the most hellish, dense, and intense rock songs I've heard since the End On album that came out earlier this year. It's not until track 10, Who, that we finally get a little bit of a break from the intensity of this album, and it's not much of one, as while this song is slower and a bit more deliberate in its progression, there's still just screaming, strange noise from the guitar in the background. It finally calms down to play some discernible actual notes on the chorus, but during the verse, the kind of plodding rhythm section and high-pitched vocals are all just sitting on this kind of unsettling, brittle noise that is the guitar. And it is at this point where the album starts to wind down a little bit. A lot of these slower tracks are on this latter half of the album. This is a 16-track album, by the way. And when I say winding down, I don't by any means mean that there aren't fast, loud, aggressive songs on here. It's just a little less concentrated on the back end here. Songs like R40 and Sanjunen provide you with some moments to breathe between the kind of blistering, aggressive punk songs on here, though they aren't really any less strange and experimental. The song Sanjunen in particular has some very strange guitar tone things going on that sounds like a mix between like a car horn, a quack from a duck, and like some sort of siren. But when we finally reach the closer of the album, the band really throws away all of your preconceptions of what the closer might be and hit you with the fastest, most aggressive, and most intense song on the whole album. When I was listening to this album, I did not think it was possible for a song to be more intense
more hellish and more dense than Breed. But the closer Nie, or Nye, it's spelled N-I-E, definitely achieves that. The song kicks it up to 11 and just tries to hit you as hard as it can for the short period of time until the end of the album. This song is dense, it is loud, it is aggressive, it is lo-fi, everything is distorted, but it's also paying some mind to some like semblance of pop appeal while it's still doing this with these kind of screeching attempts at like harmonized vocals during the short segment that I guess you could call the chorus on this song. When I was listening to this album, it did not even occur to me that they could be more intense than they already were. But this album really ends in just an explosion of energy. And what can I say? I really enjoy this album a lot. It is fast and immediate and vicious, and it operates on a very instinctual level. But there's also some kind of smart songwriting. There's some intentional planning to kind of subvert your expectations. And it's also just very noisy and experimental in the way that it plays with the sonic texture of the album. I really love the production on this thing. It knows when to be lo-fi, it knows when to be clear and punchy, and all of these songs really feel like they feed into a greater whole of the album. And like I said earlier, this album really becomes more than the sum of its parts by the end of it. I'm feeling an 8.5 on this album. I enjoyed the hell out of this thing, and if you can find some place to pick this up outside of Japan, let me know, because I'd love to spread the word around. And yeah, this is the new BLONDnewHALF album. It's called Clean, and it is anything but. I'll see you next week. Peace.